Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Bert Robinson. Bert serves as the regional executive for TVA's East Region. Born and raised in East Tennessee, not many people know God's country better. Bert, before I ask you what was easier to obtain, your pilot's license or the rank of Eagle Scout, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
Good old ice-cold water.
Ice-cold water every morning, or do you drink coffee at all?
I don't drink coffee at all. Yeah, I'll tell folks I don't suffer from that affliction.
Well, give us some time.
Yeah. No, I if I'm having anything in the morning, it's usually a smoothie.
Oh, yeah. What kind of smoothie?
Well, interestingly enough, it's the same thing every time.
Yeah.
So a bit of coconut milk, some almonds, a wedge of frozen lemon, and then blueberries and bananas.
Oh, man, that not only sounds healthy, it sounds good, though.
It's fantastic. It's like a dessert, little milkshake in the morning, but it makes me feel good that it's halfway healthy.
Man, I'm a little jealous. Yeah. What got you on that?
I work with a lady named Takia Thompson, and she used to work in Knoxville with us, and she would go to the juice bar often, and I would sort of say, I can't believe you go and have that. And so finally, one day she talked me into going over there and ended up getting the smoothie, which I really, really enjoyed. And so figured out over time, watching them make it, I'm like, I think I can make this and save myself $8.
Yeah.
And so started making it myself and just perfected it.
So you make it yourself every morning?
Every morning, yep.
Oh, man, that's discipline.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you for being here, by the way. It's good to have this conversation, get to know you a little bit better, because you're relatively new to the Chattanooga area, serving in this role for TVA.
Yeah. Not new to Chattanooga. So growing up in Athens, we sort of split our time going with our folks either to Knoxville or Chattanooga.
Yeah, because you're about halfway equidistant
right in the middle,
two, aren't you?
Exactly, right in the middle.
So you grew up in Athens, and we were talking earlier, you're talking about the Athens Mafia. It seems like anytime you meet someone from Athens, there's a great amount of community pride there.
That's right. Well, we call it the Friendly City, right? So it's a bunch of great people. And of course, my family's all from there, most of them still in Athens. Including my mama, and so get to see her occasionally, but it's always great to be back home,
right?
To visit with friends and family there.
You have brothers and sisters?
I'm the youngest of 6.
Are you really?
So, yeah, sure am.
I'm the middle of 7.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
I feel you.
Well, we were 6 until the mistake came along. Yeah. and my sister listens to this, and Jeannie, I didn't really mean that. You were the one they really wanted. They just kept trying.
Interesting. Mama tells the story about when she found out she was pregnant with me, she made my daddy tell her parents that she was pregnant again. So, yeah.
What's the age difference between the oldest and the youngest?
So there was 12 years of difference between me and then my oldest brother, who's no longer with us, but 12 years.
How about your closest sibling?
3 years.
Oh, well, that's not bad. Yeah, because my sister, there was 11 years difference.
Okay.
And she kind of grew up an only child. She had these 6 siblings who were really like parents, and then she got all the good stuff.
Well, as the baby, I think there's some advantages to being the baby. I think, we get to sit back and learn from the mistakes of all of our siblings. And by the time I came along, I think my parents were like, okay, we've seen it all. And, I was a good kid. I didn't really get into much mischief. So,
well, it's funny you say that, because my parents would always give that look to myself and my younger brother. Is that all you got? Your older brothers, we learned from them.
Yeah, exactly. I think my older brothers did enough to last my parents a lifetime. So,
that's great.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, talk about Athens a little bit. Growing up, you grew up in a large family. Were you in the rural community? Were you farming? Were you
No, we were pretty much about 3 blocks from downtown.
Okay.
In a neighborhood we called Ingleside. So we lived on Ingleside Avenue, and really had a really close-knit group of friends around, out every evening playing kick the can or what have you. Just Back then, the bicycle was king. I could go anywhere, had full access to the whole city. And typically what I did, which is I think may have helped me end up in the world I'm in now, is I used to just drive downtown, not drive, but ride my bike downtown and just go from merchant to merchant and go in and socialize. And
How old
sort
were
of
you?
8, 10, 12, just those years growing up.
So you're just a kid tooling around town on your bike, and you just go visit with folks.
Just go visit with adults. Yeah.
That's pretty
That's
cool.
exactly what I do. There's a place called the Good Friends, which is a men's clothing place, was there many years ago. The Cricket Box was a little gift store downtown. Just go at Riddle and Wallace drugstore right on the square across from the courthouse. They had the soda fountain and everything. And we just go from store to store, kind of make my rounds. And my family in the real estate business in Athens. And so their office was pretty much downtown, right across from Tennessee Wesleyan University. And so I spent, a lot of my childhood there watching my parents.
So in doing that, were you more interested in the people or what they did? Like, particularly some of the broadcasters I've spoken to talked about they would ride their bike to the local radio station and just sit and hang out. So were there businesses that said, that's maybe something I want to do? Or was it just really, it's getting to know people?
I think it was getting to know people, really, sort of this whole notion of interpersonal communication and learning how people tick. And so, I just found myself, without knowing it, sort of a student of people. And so, throughout my career, I think that's sort of how I've ended up in some of these roles. Did
the adults embrace you? And
they did. Yeah, they did. They were always willing to take a minute and chat and catch up. And I was the kid that would just drop by. I guess they thought that was interesting or unique or something that
well, they had to appreciate it though, because most kids are afraid to sit down and talk to adults or can't be bothered.
Yeah. That was never an issue for me. I just always enjoyed it, and I was always around a lot of adults, growing up and being in a big family.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, I think that has a lot to do with it. When you learn to deal with the crowd that's in the house, it's a lot easier to deal with the crowd that you meet outside the home. So at that point, you're doing that as a kid. Did you know what you wanted to do when you grew up?
No clue.
None
at all. No. I think in the back of my mind, I knew just dealing with people in some way would be great, but no, did not have a clue. In fact, did not have a clue until probably as I was getting into college.
Mm-hmm. And you went to the University of Tennessee?
I did. Go Vols.
Yeah.
Sure did.
Yeah. So if you didn't really know till you thought you were going to college, what'd you go in and major in?
Went in and majored in what was then called speech communication. It's now called communication studies. So it was in the College of Liberal Arts at the time, and now it's in the College of Communications and Information Studies. And so, so majored in speech communication, but minored in broadcasting.
Oh, okay. But you were also musical, right?
Well, I think musicals being very generous. I was.
Well, you were in the band.
I was a percussionist. That's right. I was in the Pride of the Southland band. I played what are called tenors, 5 drums.
Oh, you're the dude that's sitting there doing that thing?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Which is probably why my posture is as bad as it is today, carrying those drums around. But certainly enjoyed it.
How did you get into that?
So interestingly enough, in my hometown in Athens, when I was going into my freshman year of high school, I wasn't in the band at all, but 2 friends from Scouts saw me on the street. I was just walking down Lynn Avenue near Ingleside School, and they just drove up in their car and said, "Hey, you interested in being in the marching band?" I'm like, "Okay, sounds good. What am I going to play?" So they recruited me to come be in the band, and I played bass drum that first year and just sort of got the bug and, became a band geek and really enjoyed all of my years in the band, both at McMinn County and then at UT.
I find that amazing because you're telling me you're not really a musical guy, and you played in one of the premier marching bands in the country.
Well, that just, I guess, goes to show you that even a blind squirrel finds an acorn every now and again. No, I had a great time. I had great mentors and teachers that helped me. That second year in high school, I played in what's called the pit. It's now called the front ensemble, where you have all the keyboard instruments out there, marimbas, xylophones, those sorts of things. And I would end up having to draw symbols on the keys of the xylophone or the marimba to make sure I'm hitting my chords right. I mean, that's how little I knew about music at the time and the ability to read music. But you just figured it out. You kind of grew your chops over a period of time and ended up, working out.
Well, that's so cool. I really do. I think that's so cool that you didn't have really a musical background, but someone says, "Hey, you want to be in the band?" Sure, why not?
Yeah.
And you end up in the Pride of the Southland band. Not only is that an accomplishment, because as I told you earlier, I think maybe the band members work as hard, if not harder, than the athletes. And we were talking about some of the games you've sent. You got to see some great Tennessee history there when it comes to football.
It certainly did. Started in August of 90, one of the hottest games I remember. That's back when we used to play on artificial turf in Neyland Stadium, and the temperature on the field that day was 117 degrees, and it was brutal, and we had band members falling out, and it was just it was a sight to behold.
Yeah, we were talking about that. That was the UCLA game, because I was at that game, and I'm surprised I didn't fall out at that point. But you were there at a good time for Tennessee football, because we had the Miracle at South Bend at that same time too, and
right.
Johnny Majors years, who was
the Johnny Majors years, and from a band perspective, the great W.J. Julian, who was our director of bands and was just fantastic, and got to march in an inaugural parade, which was very cool.
Whose parade?
I guess that would have been President Clinton's first inaugural. And so that was neat, especially, the Tennessee connection with Vice President Gore. So the Pride of Southland, for many years, for many inaugurations, had been the representative from the state of Tennessee to go up there. And so that was the case that year. And it was just a neat experience.
Mm-hmm. So in addition to the band, you're in school, you're in communication studies. At any point, do you start to think about what you want to do?
Yeah, I really sort of took a liking. Well, two things. I really got my love of politics watching sort of community access television and Knoxville City Council meetings. Now, that's sad. Admittedly, that's very sad for a college student to sort of spend time that way. But that's exactly what I did. I was never one to party or anything. Band. I was obviously in the band, but when I had spare time, I was generally watching community access television or
like
C-SPAN.
City Council meetings,
exactly,
and C-SPAN and stuff like that.
Exactly. So sort of think about at the time it was Mayor Victor Ashe of Knoxville, and there was a councilwoman named Carlene Malone, and they would just go at it during council meetings. And I thought, man, this is really fascinating. Is this how it's done? And so really just started getting more and more interested on the political side.
Mm-hmm. Were you working any part-time jobs at that point?
Well, goodness, I worked throughout my college years and high school. Actually, my very first business card was actually director of outdoor maintenance for my family's real estate company, and that essentially meant I mowed all the yards.
I love the title.
Yeah, exactly. I felt great having my own business card at that age, which would have been about 15 or 16 years of age. And we had a Century 21 franchise at the time. And if you're familiar with Century 21, they had the big gold posts, big signs. And so that was part of my duties as well, as go put up and take down the gold posts and to paint them and that sort of thing.
Well, that had to give you a lot of discipline that benefited you later.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, and I think it's carried through, certainly. And, that was one thing. I worked at Interstate 75 Hardee's there at Exit 49 in Athens and, did my stint in quick service food. And I think, I often tell a lot of people, I think everybody needs to spend a little bit of time in quick service food industry just to get that interaction with people and how people treat each other.
Retail's underrated for the experience it gives you, particularly when it comes to customer service and dealing with people when they're not always their best.
That is exactly right, and actually had a pretty long stint in retail. I worked for a company called Service Merchandise. I remember Service Merchandise, but worked there for about 6 or 7 years there in Knoxville. And to this day, some of my best friends in the world are those that I've met at Service Merchandise.
Yeah, and for folks who don't remember Service Merchandise, it was basically Amazon, but the warehouse was right there, and you filled out a sheet of paper and said, "This is what I want." You didn't have a website to go to. You just walked on the shelves and you got a code, and you wrote it down.
Yeah, you walk right in the store. There's a little booth that was surrounded by clipboards, little mini clipboards, and you would take and fill it out and then turn it in, pay for it, and it would come down the conveyor belt from the back. But when I was there, I actually sold jewelry.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, that was my role there, and loved it.
So you're in school, you got the part-time jobs. What do you do when you get out?
So graduated on a Friday from UT, started on a Monday in Washington, D.C., working for Congressman Jimmy Duncan, who was our local congressman from the Knoxville area.
How does a college student get that opportunity to go straight into working for a congressman?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting story too. I should also say that as part of that, way back, I think in about 1994, because of the family business, I got my real estate license. And so worked in the family business for a little while. And as a part of that, became involved in the local realtor organization. And so I was on sort of the programming committee, helping determine, folks that would come speak to our monthly meetings. And at one point, I just invited Congressman Duncan to come and speak, to be one of our speakers. So I'll never forget this. This is at the Western Sizzlin there in Athens. And Congressman and his chief of staff, a guy named Bob Griffiths, came. So we're literally going through the line, getting our beef tips or whatever it was. And I said, Bob, if there's ever an opportunity for me to intern, I'm fascinated with politics. I would really love the opportunity. And he's like, oh, okay. And so I didn't really hear anything for about a year. And then I get a call out of the blue that says, hey, you want to come this summer? This would have been the summer of 97. You want to come up and intern this summer? And I did.
How old were you at that point?
Oh my goodness. Now you're testing my memory. So mid-20s.
Mid-20s. And what I find interesting about that is one, you're part of the Realtors Association and the importance of getting involved with community groups, with professional groups, and the program committee. So I chair the program committee at Rotary, and such a valuable way to connect with people. And I asked your age at that time because you're on the program committee, and no one else had asked the congressman to come speak, but you went ahead and did it, partly out of no one told me I couldn't.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it probably goes back a little bit to my childhood, going around and just talking to anybody I wanted to talk to, and like, well, why not? I always had great respect for Congressman Duncan and his father before him, who served in that seat, and had the opportunity to meet Congressman Duncan Sr. Actually, when I was in the band at McMinn County, the high school band, he came to one of the Christmas parades or something, and we took a picture with him. I really just had a lot of admiration and respect for the Duncans, and wanted to invite him to participate.
Did you realize when you were a kid riding your bike around Athens, what you were doing was networking?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I would be called, hey, here comes the mayor of, as a little kid, here comes the mayor, and things like that. But I didn't really realize it at the time.
Yeah, but I bet you still have a lot of those connections today.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, think about some of the folks, some of my closest relationships, even though I don't see them all the time. I think back to some of my educators in Athens, Debbie Hamilton, who's my old librarian, who actually was in my elementary school, then went to our middle school, or junior high at the time it was called. Judy Davis, my second grade teacher, Linda McGill, who's since passed, but was my freshman English teacher. It's these folks that really had a lot of impact on me growing up as a kid that I still keep in contact with today.
Yeah, and that's such an important aspect. Was there one in particular that's been kind of that rock for you your whole life, or does it just depend on the stage of life that you're in?
Yeah, I think it does depend on the stage of life, but I think if I had to think of, again, it's all, everyone trying to pick favorites, but Miss Hamilton is always a very special person in my life who always took the time to encourage me. And, we would have this thing we called philosophy club, and we would go, this was in middle school, and we would just, if we had a break in class where they were getting out for whatever reason or in service or what have you, we would just go to the library to Miss Hamilton's class. And literally it was, the philosophy club was two members, me and a girl named Fonda King. And we just would go hang out with Miss Hamilton, and it was great.
And what would the philosophy club do?
Just sit and chat. There was, nothing philosophical about it, other than, not being in class at the time and just enjoying time together.
Well, and again, not knowing it built the basis for kind of what you do.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's really weird how it all works out.
Yeah, how all that past history contributes to where you
That's
are,
right.
where you are today. So you get out of school, you go work for Congressman Duncan. Talk about that experience. Going to D.C., you're a kid from Athens. You're going to Washington, and how different is it? And what are some of the things you did with the congressman's office?
Yeah, so I never thought I would end up in D.C., to be honest with you. I was sort of a mama's boy, certainly, and I'd love East Tennessee, as I never thought I would leave. But I had this great opportunity to go up there, and I thought, gosh, if you don't, if not now, when?
Yeah.
And so just decided to go, and again, had a great opportunity. I know Congressman Duncan and the Duncan family so much for that opportunity. But really went up there as a lot of young staffers go up to be what is either called a staff assistant, or for me, it was called a special assistant. And you're essentially opening mail. You're giving tours of the Capitol. You're answering the phone. You're interacting with constituents that are coming in the office, sort of the first impression of the office for folks that come in. And then over time, took on different roles. And by the time I left, about 6 years later, I was the legislative director.
That's pretty good progress.
Yeah, it was, but that's the way it works on the Hill, right? That's not unusual at all. I mean, pretty much most folks kind of start that way and work their way up. There's a lot of turnover on Capitol Hill, and so you have generally a lot of opportunities that present themselves.
What surprised you in that experience going in? Because you got some preconceived notions going in, but when you get there, what surprised you that what it wasn't like what you thought it would be like?
One of the things that struck me was that members of Congress, at least back then, and this is quite a while ago, but they're very, there's a lot of friendships on both sides of the aisle, right? So it's not as maybe polarized as it is today.
It's not the battle you see on the media.
Exactly. And even back then, the media portrays it as one thing, and it's quite different when you're there. I think most people are there. They really want to do the best they can on behalf of the country, on behalf of their constituents. Certainly. And in the case of Congressman Duncan, I sort of talk about members of Congress in really two schools, folks that are very interested in legislation, sort of pushing legislative proposals to see if they can get them enacted. And then you have folks that are very constituent focused. And Congressman Duncan was a mixture of both, but really he was known for his constituent service. And so, you go into that office and you know that when a constituent calls, that's the most important person in the world to the congressman and by extension to the staff. So we did everything we could to bend over backwards to take care of our constituents that were calling.
I think you make a great point there, because some of the most successful Congress people are the ones who really overserve constituents, to your point.
That is exactly
you
right.
Drop everything, you get back to them. And then there's some others that you can call and never get a call back.
That's exactly right. I mean, and certainly, there's what we always call congressional courtesy. So if you call and you're not from a district, congressional courtesy says you refer them to the correct member of Congress, right? Because you're not technically supposed to be responding to the folks that you don't represent. And so, but we always did our level best to try to help anybody that called, no matter who they represented. And a lot of times it was just listening, right? Being a listening ear and letting them vent about whatever the national issue of the day was. But I'll tell you, I was up in D.C. at a very interesting time in history. I mean, I think back, we had the Clinton impeachment, we had 9/11, we had the D.C. sniper.
Wow.
We had times we evacuated the Capitol one day or all of the offices around the Capitol, because there was an aircraft. I guess this was post 9/11, and it was actually around President Reagan's funeral. But it turned out to be, I think, the governor of Kentucky was flying in, and for some reason
Got lost.
Or I don't know what happened, but they ended up evacuating the whole complex, which was pretty interesting.
We were very sensitive at that point, and deserved to be. Can you talk a little bit about 9/11? I'm assuming you were in the Capitol that day.
So it was in the Rayburn House Office Building, directly across Independence Avenue from the Capitol. And so we that day started as any other day would. We come in, we've got the TVs on in the office, in the back office. At the time, I think I was probably a legislative assistant, so we sort of huddled in a back room and were basically answering constituent mail questions about different issues. And we've always watching the news, and we see this issue, fire at the World Trade Center. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Didn't think much about it. And then, not too long later, the second plane hits the towers, and we're like, uh-oh, something's going on. Interestingly enough, at the time, though, and it's much different today, but there was not really an emergency protocol that I recall. People were sort of looking at each other, wondering what to do. The congressman was in his office and basically answering media calls from folks in Knoxville. And actually we had what used to be a weather lady down in Miami who used to be in Knoxville called in for an interview as well. So we were just sort of sitting around wondering, watching the news, figuring out what was going on. We're hearing all these rumors about car bombs on the mall, down at the State Department. There's an explosion at the Pentagon. Nobody really knew anything, and news was trickling in. So we spent most of that morning there sort of wondering, okay, what do we need to do? And so eventually we were told sort of, okay, you're free to go, make your way home. And so I got in the car, and what normally is a 20-minute drive to Northern Virginia ended up being about 3 hours to get about 4 miles, because I had to go way out 295 and across the GW Bridge and find my way. But the interesting thing, one of the things I remember is just the sound of fighter jets overhead, which is something you never heard. I mean, you saw commercial aircraft all the time coming into Washington National Airport, but never fighter jets. I mean, you saw helicopters all the time, but to hear the roar of afterburners
and they're low too.
They're all over the place. You're like, something big is going on.
Yeah.
So we all know how that unfolded over a period of days and weeks and months. But it was a really interesting time to be up there.
Yeah, and I'm curious about it. I wanted to spend a little time on it because you went in to Congress, serving Congress at a different age, different mindset, I guess is a better way to put it, where we were still, frankly, quite a little bit innocent. And then this hits, and I'm curious how things changed after that. And the thing that always comes to my mind right away is that evening, the entire House and maybe even the Senate on the Capitol steps singing "God Bless America."
That's right. Yeah, and
can't envision that today.
I can envision that today, because when the country's down, we tend to come together, right? No matter what the political reality is at the time. And I think that's one of the great things about our country, that when the going gets tough, we band together. And that's exactly what happened around 9/11. And, I think you had a lot more neighbors having conversations that maybe they didn't normally have conversations. I just remember the massive amount of American flags that you saw after that. They were everywhere. The sense of patriotism just went through the roof at the time. Now, it's a shame that it takes, something like 9/11 to make that happen oftentimes. But again, when the country's backed against a wall, I think that many times brings out the best in our country.
What changed in your day-to-day over the next year when you got back? How did the Capitol change? Because you were talking about there was really no protocol for what to do in emergencies.
Yeah, so that's when I've never seen so many Jersey barriers than I did after 9/11, because they essentially started making that area a fortress. And it was the delicate balance of how do you secure this complex, but also recognize that this is the people's house. And you have to have access. And so I think that, the Capitol Police, the Sergeant at Arms, and those folks really did an admirable job of walking that fine line, because access, it was sort of limited a little bit in the aftermath, but they figured out pretty quickly that you could get people in there and you could do things, the magnetometers and all of that, like going through the airport.
Did they have magnetometers on the doors before? I'm trying to think back, because one of the first times I went to the Capitol was in the late 80s, and you could just walk in.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just walk in off the street.
I think by the time I started, they did have magnetometers in place, but things just, they were looking a bit more closer. They had the X-ray machines that they sent all of your information, or all of your materials through. I think one of the big things that changed for me was, going in the garages, the parking garages around the Capitol complex. you've got the folks with a mirror that are looking under your vehicle for things now. And so some of that stuff changed.
Did it change how you interacted with, or how Congress interacted, how they worked together? Did it, you think, make people more open to sit down and talk to each other?
Yeah, I think at the time, again, I was up there at a time where, people were having regular conversations across the aisle.
Yeah.
I remember some of my boss's best friends were Democrats back then. So I don't think that was unusual, but I do think, again, it brought everyone together, to sort of address what had happened and to figure out, okay, what do we do in response to this? And so that, of course, played out over a period of years. But yeah, I mean, I think certainly it was a very unique time to be on the Hill, to see the way people worked with each other towards a common goal. Yeah.
After that, how much longer were you with the congressman?
So that was in 2001. So I was there through the end of 2004.
What did you do when you left?
So at the time, my then fiance and I, this was I was married about 11 days before, 11 days after 9/11.
So really?
9/11 happens. That's just 11 days before we get married on the 22nd of September. At
least you'll always be able to remember it.
Absolutely. Exactly. And then we, of course, honeymooned. Our honeymoon was in early October. And so kind of an interesting story there. We were flying to Italy for our honeymoon, and the plan was to fly out of BWI in Baltimore. And so for whatever reason, we got switched to a flight out of Dulles and went and did our honeymoon and came back. Well, on my desk when I got back was a Washington Times article, and it was on the front page of I think it was the business section at the time, but it's a picture of me and my wife in line at the security checkpoint at BWI. But the interesting thing is, it appears, if you look at the picture, that I'm with some random lady and my wife is with some random guy because of the way we're positioned in line. So we got a lot of grief about that when we got back. But
and that's going on your honeymoon.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
So you go on your honeymoon. I'm trying to get to how you got to TVA. Was that directly after Congress?
It was not. So at the time, my wife worked at UPS, and she worked in their public affairs shop. And so she was actually transferred, got a promotion down to their corporate headquarters in Sandy Springs, Georgia, just north side of Atlanta. So being the good spouse that I am, I happily trailed along with her. And actually, it gave me one of the most unique and rewarding opportunities of my life, which was at the time, again, this was the end of 2004. My daughter was born in September of 2004. So we knew that we didn't want to raise our children in the Washington, D.C. area. We wanted to get back down south.
Is your wife from the South?
She is. She's from Knoxville area. Yeah. And so Molly is her name. Molly was born in September of 2004. And so we knew we wanted to get back down south. So Heather, my wife, was sort of working in that direction, from a job perspective, what opportunities were down in Atlanta. So she got this great opportunity to be a spokesperson for UPS. And so I had the awesome opportunity to be a full-time dad.
Oh, that's cool.
So for the first 9 months of 2005, I was a full-time dad. And so Molly and I would just go to Home Depot and, hang out. We'd have crawling camp and do all these fun things. And really that is time that I would never regret spending. Just had a fantastic time. And then that sort of led me into my next role, which was working with the March at Eimers Foundation, doing maternal and child health, public policy kind of issues.
Well, in a sense, you were training for that by watching your daughter.
That's exactly.
What did that 9 months teach you?
Well, I think for me, it was just, and I think we all, the folks that have kids, you understand at a certain point, you don't get that time back.
Yeah.
Right. And so that opportunity to spend that time with her at such a young age, and that formative time really was just super special to me. It's hard to describe.
I'd imagine you've got a pretty special bond with her that others who
Yeah, I think so. I think a special bond with both of my kids. I've got a 20. She's now 20 years old at UT, and my son is 17, a junior in high. Both of them juniors, wrapping up their junior year. So yeah, but that was special to have that time, and certainly, the phases of your relationship with your children is, it's an interesting period of time, right? That you see them grow up and have that experience as a baby, and where she is today as a 20-year-old.
Well, to your point, you don't get that time back, and it's gone in a blink. And as my kids were born and growing up, I'm a few years older than you. I think from my perspective, I didn't truly appreciate how hard that was. Because I imagine it's a heck of a lot harder than anyone thinks, to stay home and help or be the parent who stays home and raises the kid.
Yeah, well, and all credit goes to my lovely wife who, when we did finally get back to Knoxville with TVA, we made a joint decision that, hey, I'll, as Heather would stay home with the kids, which was just the best gift that our children could have received, right? And it is hard, and she's certainly sacrificed what was a fantastic career at UPS to take on that role, and has done a marvelous job. And I think that is evidenced by the way our children have turned out, both great young people. But you're exactly right. Now, I was on the road a lot when I got to TVA, quite a bit. And so the burden really fell to her in many respects to raise our kids. And, I tried to be there for the, what we term as the important things, the plays at school, the events, those sorts of things. But certainly that burden to a large degree fell on her.
Yeah.
And I'm ever mindful of that.
How long were you with the March of Dimes?
About 3 years, a little less than 3 years. And interestingly, the way I got to the March of Dimes, Hurricane Katrina had hit. Of course, we all remember that. I guess that was in the 2005 time frame. And so I volunteered as not working at the time full time. I volunteered at an intake center for the Red Cross, where folks were coming in, and I thought,
Coming in from New Orleans to Atlanta?
Exactly.
Yeah, because everyone had to get out of New Orleans.
Everybody had to get out. And so that sort of opened my eyes to the nonprofit world, which, very great missions that the Red Cross have. And certainly to today, I serve on the board of the American Red Cross of East Tennessee, something that I was exposed to in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and the great work that they did then. But at some point along the line, there was an opportunity at the March of Dimes Foundation. I didn't know anything about maternal and child health at all from a policy standpoint, but I thought, this seems to be a good opportunity, and it was a great time. I worked in what was then the East Region office, so I had public affairs responsibilities or government relations responsibilities for the eastern half of the country. So I would travel to state capitals in the eastern half of the country, and we would talk about these maternal and child health issues. And the big ones at the time were newborn screening. All newborns get screened for certain genetic diseases. And so a lot of our time was spent on trying to expand that newborn screening panel of tests. And so we were successful in doing that, getting more and more of these conditions added to that newborn screening panel. And so that was a very fulfilling time for me, even though, again, maternal and child health issues weren't a huge interest of mine. I became sort of, I really appreciated the mission of the March of Dimes Foundation and its, historic connection.
Well, between that and Congress, it had to give you a great perspective of the big issues in the country.
Yeah, that's right. And certainly, even to this day, access to healthcare is a huge issue, remains a huge issue for a large part of the population. The newborn screening issue, just healthcare in general, such a huge issue for our country. So certainly, yes. That was one of the big issues or still is the big issues of our time.
So you guys are down in Atlanta. You're working March of Dimes, but the opportunity with TVA comes. and that's an opportunity to get home.
That's an opportunity to get home, and that's exactly right. And so when I was on the Hill, one of our, and in the legislative shop, one of my issue areas was energy and staffing the congressman on the TVA caucus, for example. So I always had a connection to TVA.
And the Knoxville congressman's always going to have a great interest in TVA and be involved with everything that congressionally.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's the corporate headquarters is in his backyard, and certainly that was the case with Congressman Duncan, who had a great interest in TVA at the time. And so I had the opportunity to work on all those issues, and I always loved working on TVA issues and became close with the folks up at our Washington, D.C. office. Well, I say what would be the TVA Washington, D.C. office at the time. Had the opportunity to meet all sorts of TVA executives, and at the time the TVA board members, which were 3 full-time members at the time.
I remember that.
That has since changed, of course, to 9 part-time members. But always really appreciated it and thought, that's when I really thought, okay, man, in my career, I would love to end up at TVA.
So you were, in a sense, starting to connect the dots.
Right.
I've got this experience, and this really interested me. Boy, if something like that ever came up.
That's exactly what happened. And sure enough, this would have been in sort of the December time frame, back in, I guess it would have been 2007, this opportunity comes up. And so I applied, and I thought, you've got a pretty good, sort of band of experience given the work I did on the TVA caucus and energy issues, you ought to have a decent shot at this. And so I remember getting the call to interview, and just being floored, being able to come from Atlanta up to Knoxville and sit down and interview for that position. I remember vividly, there was this room in the Knoxville office complex where we ended up interviewing with to this day, feels to me like the largest round wooden table in existence. So it was me on one side and then 3 people on the other side.
It's a little intimidating.
It was a bit intimidating, but again, from my childhood, growing up and being comfortable in these interactions, that sort of set me up to have a successful interview, and it ended up being, going my way. And I remember being back in Atlanta after that interview and sitting there, and this will sound cheesy, but sitting there thinking, okay, the guy I interviewed with, a guy named Bob Morris, who ended up being my first boss at TVA, the guy that hired me, sitting at my desk at the March of Dimes going, okay, Bob, I need you to call me and offer me that job. And I kid you not, within about 2 minutes, the phone rings and Bob Morris is offering me a job.
Wow.
So that's one of those moments that to me is, spiritual in a way.
It's
right.
Yeah.
It just all lined up the way it was supposed to line up, and got this great opportunity to come to such a great organization that is so service-minded and really working with a bunch of top-notch, high-caliber people.
And I just want to point out, it didn't line up happenstance. I mean, it was all the groundwork you laid unknowingly to a great degree.
Yeah, that's right.
What was that first job at TVA?
So came in as what was then called a Valley Relations Manager, which was essentially government relations, managing TVA's relationship with public officials. And an interesting side note, because I know you've spoken to her, the role that I came in to fill had previously been filled by a lady named Carol Eimers.
Yep.
And so Carol went over to the operations side of the house, and that created the opportunity for me to apply for this job. And so, really loved the opportunity. I came in, and actually this month on the 31st of March will be my 17-year anniversary at TVA.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a fantastic ride so far. I hope I've got plenty of time left to go. But interestingly enough, I was on the job about 8 months, and then we had this terrible incident called the Kingston ash spill. And so Roane County was a part of my territory. So my responsibility from the morning of the event through really today, and to a large degree, although we have a number of other folks that are working on it, is to manage both the event itself, the aftermath of the event, and our relationships with those elected officials in Roane County, which was as terrible as that accident was. ended up being a great opportunity for me to see all different sides of our organization and to be able to work with all different types of people, from the CEO down to the people in the coal handling yard at Kingston. Really just a unique opportunity to see a response. I said earlier, the way that our country responds after a national event. I mean, that's exactly the way TVA works too. TVA is at its best when we are responding to a natural disaster, flooding or terrible storms, tornadoes, or what have you. The people of TVA really rise to the occasion.
I think that's what people don't get. And what I mean by that is they see a big monolith, TVA. The reality is it's a bunch of caring people.
You're exactly right. People that come in and day out and want to do the right thing on behalf of the 10 million people that live here in the Tennessee Valley. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you got a bit of baptism by fire by having that put on you, huh?
I did, but I've always, for whatever reason, maybe this is a sickness I have, but I tend to sort of be even keel all the time.
Yeah.
I don't get rattled by big events like that, and I tend to thrive in response to things like that. So I really took it as a great opportunity to go in and work on behalf of the company. And really try to right what was a wrong at the time that nobody, of course, knew was going to happen. I mean, if we had it to do over again, nobody would have wanted it to happen. But it's just one of those things.
You're going to try and make it right.
Exactly. And I remember our CEO at the time, Tom Kilgore, basically said, not only are we going to restore this area to what it was before, we're going to try to make it better than it was before. Yeah. And I feel really good about how TVA responded to that event and all of the laser focus that, at the time, 10,000 or so employees had to go in and fix what had happened and to make it better.
Well, you guys have had to respond to a number of things over the last year. Just the flooding from what was the
Hurricane Helene?
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's another great example. So that's another incident that happened in the East region here when the aftermath of Helene came in, and we saw this record rainfall. So many records were broken as far as rainfall, runoff.
It's crazy.
Flows. Oh, just unbelievable, the amount of water. And I'm always amazed and humbled by the power of water.
Yeah.
Water.
People underestimate it.
Oh, every day. And, when people talk about turn around, don't drown, there's a reason, right? Because water can do some very interesting things. And if you talk to our friends up in Upper East Tennessee, at Irwin, in Mountain City, in Greenville, in Newport, at Cocke County, those people lived that event, certainly. And, TVA, fortunately, TVA was able to help in a way to help manage that water because, we often talk about that system of dams, especially up in that part of the Tennessee Valley, that was built for that purpose, to store floodwater and to prevent downstream flooding. And that's exactly what it was used for in response to Hurricane Helene. So we've got an incredible team in our river management group that all they do day in and day out is worry about water. How do we get the water downstream? How do we lessen the impact of the water if there's a bunch? And it's pretty awe-inspiring to watch them work, especially in response to an event like Hurricane Helene.
Yeah. How does that lead you to your current job?
So interesting, it goes back to Carol again. So Carol served in this role as regional executive in the East. And this job in particular is something, since we shifted to a regional model about 4 years ago, where we really wanted to focus more on the communities that we served. And we thought the way that this regional model is set up, where we have not only the public officials, the community leaders, the business leaders, nonprofits, but we also have our customers. So in the East region, we have 39 local power companies, like locally here, EPB, such a fantastic partner of ours. 39 of those. And then we have 9 direct serve customers, which is think of them as our big industrial customers.
Like a Volkswagen.
Well, Volkswagen is actually served by EPB. So you think about a Walker up in the Cleveland area, some of those really big industries that we serve directly. And so putting all of those different stakeholder groups under this regional model would allow us to serve the communities better, more efficiently, and understand that there are synergies between all of these different people. When you go to the Rotary Club, when you go to the chamber meeting, all of these people are in the room.
Yeah.
And so you approach these relationships in a very similar fashion, right? So that was always something, this role in particular was always something I was interested in. And I was very fortunate to be able to sit back and watch and learn and listen to my friend Carol as she performed these duties. And then when she got called for a new opportunity heading our HR group, then that opened up this opportunity for me. And I was so fortunate to be able to have the opportunity to lead this truly fantastic team.
In a great sense, you're not riding your bike around East Tennessee, but you're doing the same thing.
You're exactly right. That is exactly right. I'm now in a vehicle traveling to all these communities.
But you're going around and seeing people and having conversations and learning about them and learning their needs and making sure that they know that you're there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And one of my big goals for the first, I'm approaching a year in this role, was to get out and visit with all of our local power companies. So over the last it took about 10 months, but getting out and visiting each of our local power companies in their offices, in their space. I think that's important to go to them and really listen and learn. And I've learned a lot of interesting things. I think at TVA, many times we sit around and think, they must think about TVA all the time, their relationship with TVA. They don't think about TVA near as often as I think we think they do, because many of them have 4 or 5 utilities that they're running. But it's just interesting to go out and hear the perspective of your customers, understand what's important to them and where they think that TVA is hitting the mark, and quite frankly, where they think TVA is not hitting the mark. And that's just as important, right?
Yeah.
To figure out how we can do things better.
Well, that customer service, just having that open dialogue, open communication with it. I do have a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
This one I mentioned in the introduction. All right, what's tougher, pilot license or Eagle Scout?
Well, certainly the path to Eagle Scout took a bit longer. That was something. I was in scouting most of my childhood, and it had two things to me had a huge impact in my life. Number one was the death of my brother in an automobile accident, my oldest brother.
I'm sorry to hear that.
No, thank you. He passed away in 1983 in a automobile accident. And it's interesting how things work out. So the TVA's anniversary when we were created was on May 18th, 1933. My brother's birthday was May 18th, 1960, and he actually passed away May 4th, 1983. And so, I learned at a very young age this whole notion of perspective about what's important in life and what's not important in life. And I think that seeing how my parents managed through that grief and that loss really had a profound impact on me as a kid growing up, number one, but number two, as an adult today. It really has shaped a lot of my outlook on life. So that certainly one thing. And the other thing was my path through scouting. Scouting's been such an important part of my life. And, it's like my college experience too. I mean, it took right up to the end, about 3 months before my 18th birthday, to finally achieve the rank of Eagle Scout. But you
achieved it. And what I find interesting, because I have a good friend that I grew up with, and he got his Eagle Scout, but I never got into scouting. I quit Webelos when I didn't get a snack one day because I didn't wear my uniform. That's the kind of kid I was. But from the perspective standpoint, today and I'm 62, when you meet someone who's an Eagle Scout, that's a noted accomplishment. Even when you're in your 60s like me, people look and go, this person's serious. That's hard work.
It was hard work. It was quite a journey, and there's a reason. I mean, they want you to have that well-rounded experience and do all these things and learn all these things and learn these leadership lessons that you pick up over that time. And certainly, I think it served me. It served me well. Now, to your question about what was harder, I would say at the end of the day, just the perseverance to get the Eagle Scout Award was a little more difficult. Flying is my passion. Mm-hmm. I don't do it near as much as I want to do it, but I've always been fascinated with aircraft and, have looked to the skies sort of longingly about, gosh, why don't you do this? Why don't you go and get your license? And I guess it was in my mid-40s finally, Heather and I, my wife, were talking. She's like, well, why don't you do it? Just go do it. And so I did, and just love it.
I got to get you together with Chip Baker, who's a county commissioner.
Okay,
Chip had his pilot's license at a young age, let it lapse, and now he's back re-earning it, and he's passionate about flying.
There's something about being up there among the sky, sort of looking down on God's creation, and it's a different perspective.
Yeah. Before I get to my last question, I do want to remind our listeners who makes all this possible, and it's thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. Follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit tva.com/do good here to explore exciting career opportunities at TVA. All right, here's my standard last question. And you mentioned the word perspective, and I think you've got such a good perspective on life. And I do see the calmness in you. Your blood pressure must be perfect.
Generally is. Yeah.
No problem there, huh? Think back to your 25-year-old self. What would you tell that 25-year-old self is important for a happy life?
It would probably go back to perspective. What's important in life and what's not. My mom always would say, she would ask the question, will it matter a year from now? And if you apply that question to most of what you think at the time are challenges or problems in your life, if you think about it through the lens, will it matter a year from now? 99.9% of the time, nothing matters a year from now, right? So what are the big things like losing a sibling or losing a child? It's perspective. It's knowing, to me, what's important. And the quicker you figure that out as a young person, I think the better served you're going to be in later years, certainly.
I like that question. Your mom's a wise lady.
She is indeed.
Bert, I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming in and talking.
Mike, thank you for the opportunity. It's been great fun.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.